I welcome in my former KGO co-worker and colleague and very good friend, John Rothman, to the show. Hi, John Rothman.
Good morning. I do want
Hi.
you, I have to tag on the Brady Bunch. I
Okay.
still have my bachelor apartment from 1973.
Right.
And the only thing that has been replaced is the refrigerator.
What?
Oh.
Everything else is state of the art. The same shag rug, the same colors, uh, the bathrooms, everything is exactly the same as it was in 1973. So when I go to my office, which it now serves as, and I do my research, I step back in time and love every minute of it.
What color is the carpet?
A brownish shag.
Oh, yeah. I'm replacing that. I don't know if I want to see that every single time. I don't know. I
They've
don't.
replaced in the other apartments. If I ever, I finally give it up when I'm long gone, they'll probably put hardwood floors in, which is what they've done everywhere else.
Yeah. And I think that's the best way to go. All right, I wanted to ask you right off the top about what's being called the most predictable impeachment that we have seen thus far. Is it the most predictable impeachment? Are Republicans being really unwise to start an inquiry like this over something that they most likely know they can't even prove? I mean, they've been trying and trying and trying. Is it just a show? Is that what we're watching?
Yes, exactly. I think this morning on my podcast, Around the Political World with John Rothman, I spent 10 minutes describing the history of impeachment. I
Mm-hmm.
won't do it all for you now, but I will say that it is the most ill considered move that
Mm-hmm.
Kevin McCarthy could ever make. He has control of the House of Representatives. They control three of the major committees that are investigating Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. They've come up with nothing. So, they should continue the process. I think this was done at the urging of Donald Trump, who
Yeah.
wants to say, I was impeached twice. Now they're going to impeach Joe Biden. It's tit for tat. And I think it's disgraceful.
Well, he's doing it, McCarthy, at the urging of the Freedom Caucus, right? That they won't go along with votes on other things unless he does open this impeachment inquiry. So he's kind of being forced into it, is what
Well,
it feels like.
his margin in the House is 5 votes. Uh, they're obstructing, the Freedom Caucus is now obstructing the defense spending bill.
I heard four. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, it's five.
Okay.
As of this morning, who knows why there was the shift? It was four, now evidently it's five.
Okay.
But let me just tell you these Republican extremists, and that's what they
Hmm.
are holding the defense bill hostage.
Yes.
And the Republicans in the Senate are absolutely horrified by it. So my sense is that this is a political tactic. May I say that you announced the decision of Mitt Romney not to run for another term. And I first met Mitt Romney in 1964 at the Republican National Convention. He is a year older, 2 years older than I am. And I was getting my shoes shined, and so was he. We had a lovely chat. Nice guy. I mean,
Yeah.
we were teenagers. Uh, the Republican Party is, I'm I'm really sorry he's retiring. The Republican Party is losing a voice, a
Yeah.
man who was the nominee of the party for the presidency of the United States, who is a responsible Republican. And in a way, I understand why he's doing it, but I regret it because I didn't vote for Mitt Romney. I would never have voted for Mitt Romney. But I can tell you that his courage in
Yeah.
voting for the impeachment of Donald Trump, particularly in the January 6th impeachment trial, was a profile in courage.
It's the same thing where, because we disagree fundamentally on policies, especially social policies, and we're talking about domestic policies like abortion and other things, I could never vote for Liz Cheney, and I could never vote for Mitt Romney, and I could never have voted for John McCain. But I respect them. I respected them as leaders. On the other side, when I listened to what they had to say, they didn't speak with hatred. They made their cases. I understood what the argument was. There was a whole different way of talking back then.
You're
And
right.
so I'm sad to see that caliber of person with character go. But is there something to having, you know, when you hit 80, being too old to be in office? Or do you think that the older people should have a voice in Congress as well,
I
or
think
in the Senate?
the people need to decide.
Yeah,
If we voters think that someone is too old or is not doing their job, that's
right,
why we have elections
right.
for the House every 2 years, for the Senate every 6 years.
Yeah.
And that's the way I like to see it. I've never voted for term limits, don't believe in term limits. I believe the only limit should be on what the voters decide.
Sandy asks a question. Is it age? He says it's his age. But Sandy wants to know, is he not seeking a second term, Romney, because he no longer fits in with the extremists in the GOP? Maybe he's tired of fighting it.
It may be a combination of both. His statement this morning, which was very clear that he would be in his 80s when his second term expired, and he felt that was too old. But who knows? I mean, he's not taken seriously by the Republican establishment. You know
Right,
what's amazing to me? You know, I teach a course on defeated candidates for president, and some defeated candidates for president have been discarded by their party, but others have gone on to very distinguished careers.
right,
And when you consider Mitt Romney, who has been a governor, and remember, he was governor of Massachusetts, now a United States Senator from Utah,
right.
nominated by the Republican Party for the presidency of the United States. This is a man whose judgment should be listened to. But clearly, he's on the outs with the Republican leadership. They are not fond of him. Any man who would vote to impeach Donald Trump in the United States Senate clearly fell out of favor with the Republicans. And I have not examined, to be honest with you, the political situation in Utah. Uh, the Republican Party there still supports Donald Trump. And it may be that Mitt Romney understood he would have tremendous opposition if he ran for another term.
Yeah, there was a comment in the chat from John Watson wondering if Romney isn't running because he had a hard time getting reelected because of his vote on impeachment over Trump. So maybe he's seeing that. But also, there's some folks wondering whether this is a dig at Biden to, to leave. Maybe he planned to retire anyway or not to run anyway, so that maybe using age is like a political dig.
Yeah, there's no question.
Yeah.
Mitt Romney is saying it's time for the older generation,
Hmm.
including Donald Trump and including Joe Biden, to retire from the scene. And I think there are a lot of people with whom that might resonate.
Yeah.
But the simple fact is that Mitt Romney is 76 years old. He's in very good health. He's an extremely articulate Republican. He opposes Donald Trump vigorously. And the one thing I would expect from him in 2024, as his term expires, that he will continue that opposition. He'll do it as still a member of the U.S. Senate. His term doesn't expire till January of 25. And I think that will have a real impact. Now, here's the question. Does anybody care what a defeated candidate for president thinks? Because even the millions who voted for Mitt Romney, today, it's a blip on the screen. You know, he's just another voice. And
I
that
don't
also is
know.
a commentary.
I feel like he has a big enough name that when he speaks or makes a comment, it's usually, it becomes news. So I think he has a big enough following that people may still care what he has to say, even if
I
he's
hope
not a
that's right.
senator. Yeah.
I hope that's correct.
Let's talk a little bit about something else that happened today. Former President Trump is being restricted on how and when he can look at, talk about classified information, right? A judge decided this today after a sealed hearing yesterday, and it is largely in line with restrictions special counsel Jack Smith sought to protect classified information that may be evidence in the case against Trump, accusing him, of course, of mishandling criminally the sensitive national security secrets at Mar-a-Lago. So that means that for the first time, the court has some limits around this classified information, how he can access it, when and why, and talk about it as well.
Well, you have to understand, he is a former president of the United States. Every former president of the United States receives briefings from the CIA. They all are in constant touch, at least theoretically, with opinion makers. And so when a judge gives an order to Donald Trump based on the fact that he faces a criminal case because he did violate national security, and there's no question about it,
Yeah.
how does that play out? And it's a very interesting question. Should a court be able to say that a former president of the United States should not have access to information? And that, I'm sure, is something that Donald Trump will fight vigorously. I am in favor of former presidents still being in the loop in general. But Donald Trump, to me, is an exception to the rule because
Yep.
he has so violated on every level all the rules of, well, security, national security. He stands a very good chance of being convicted
Yep.
of the crime, and it is a crime, of violating national security. So that is something you have to take into account. Donald Trump is not a normal former president. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And it's very clear that the people who make these decisions are very concerned about him.
I feel like, and this is Judge Eileen Cannon, right? So I believe she's a Trump appointee in this case.
That's correct.
She says she's warning in this order of that consequences, there will be consequences if any of classified or otherwise sensitive information is improperly revealed to the public, pointing out such disclosures may violate the law. And as said in the chat, that Trump is a blabbermouth, that he gets up in front of a microphone and he just he just can't be quiet about anything. It's like there's no filter, right? The secrets spill out, things that aren't supposed to come out, come out. And so I don't know if it makes a difference for a judge to say, listen, you can't have access to these documents. We need to protect these documents from you. He's probably already seen them, right?
No, he may have access to new material as well. As I say, former presidents traditionally receive briefings, particularly if, well, Donald Trump hasn't traveled abroad, but particularly when you travel abroad, you're brought up to date so that you don't make mistakes.
Right.
But Donald Trump is not a conventional former president, and that's the problem. Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama, George Bush, all receive briefings,
the daily
when
briefings,
they travel abroad.
But I don't think this is what that's about. Apparently this is protecting classified information that may be evidence in the case against Trump.
That's
now,
correct.
It may be that daily briefings as well, but it may be the stuff that he had that was recovered that they don't want him to have access to anymore, which makes perfect sense to me, because if he mishandled it once, what's to say he couldn't mishandle it again?
You've summed it up splendidly.
Okay. Let's move on to another legal case. There's a judge in the case about Mark Meadows. Mark Meadows was trying to get his case moved from Georgia to federal court, right, for a myriad of reasons.
In Washington, D.C.
Right, a federal court in D.C. And he wanted the judge to pause on the decision to keep the Georgia election case in state court. And the judge is saying, I won't do that. There's not going to be a pause for you. And Meadows was saying, look, I could be convicted and incarcerated before an appeal to this is even heard, so I want you to put a pause on it. And the judge says no. A U.S. District Judge Stephen Jones rejecting a request by Mark Meadows, who is the former White House Chief of Staff for Donald Trump, that he pause this decision not to move the Georgia election subversion case to federal court. Jones unmoved. Here's the quote. Meadows' contentions that he would be irreparably harmed by the possibility of facing trial next month are insufficient to carry his burden on the emergency stay requested. No trial date has been set for Meadows, and he admits it is not guaranteed that his trial will be in October. Denied. There you go.
Cheers for the judge. The judge is right. I've studied chiefs of staff. I've participated in seminars dealing with chief of staffs. There are a number of books that have been written either by former chiefs of staff, or in fact, 8 chiefs of staff sat on a stage at the University of California and talked about being chief of staff. Yeah. Mark Meadows is not protected by anything. Remember, Sherman Adams, who was Eisenhower's chief of staff, had to resign. Why? He accepted a vicuna coat. Can you imagine? That was enough to force him out. Bob Haldeman, who was one of the most capable chiefs of staff, ultimately was convicted of a conspiracy with President Nixon to obstruct Watergate, the investigation, and went to jail for it. A chief of staff has to act responsibly, and Mark Meadows clearly blew it. Now, let me remind people the atmosphere in the White House. You believe you are above everything when you're in the White House. It's a real power surge, if you will. And I think Mark Meadows fell victim to that. What will be more interesting to me now is whether Mark Meadows flips on Donald Trump. If he flips on Donald Trump, it'll be Trump's word versus Meadows' word. And this is going to be a very interesting moment in the course of American jurisprudence. I'm waiting for Mark Meadows to be on the stand.
Do you think Meadows will flip?
I think he probably will. And I believe that because if he doesn't, he almost certainly will go to jail. It'll be a plea bargain. That's what happens.
I mean, I guess you're taking that would be a big chance to take, because if he flips, then he's the villain to the GOP, right?
Not necessarily.
If he
doesn't, he doesn't care. He doesn't care if he's a villain to the GOP. Let me remind you, the first thing you want to do is protect yourself. And he's not going to take the rap for Donald Trump.
Well, what happened to that? Because hasn't always been how it is. Used to be that if something happened to a president, the people around him would then fall on their swords to protect the president.
Not necessarily. All you have to do is read the memoirs of many White House insiders to see that people like to spill their gut. And the other thing is, everyone wants to protect their place in history. Mm-hmm. When you've worked in the White House, you have a place in history, and you want to protect that place. And that is, I think, what Mark Meadows will do. And you can go back to chiefs of staff or people who worked in the White House over and over again who have precisely done just that. They protect themselves first.
Vilma writes, Meadows won't flip because they believe Trump will be reelected. Or even if any Republican is reelected, there's going to be, pardons flying. So maybe it's not worth flipping if you really believe that if you're taking a chance that you could get a pardon from a Republican. I don't think the Democrats are going to roll in and pardon.
Yep. The way Donald Trump has talked about Mark Meadows in recent days, if I were Mark Meadows, I wouldn't put any on Donald Trump doing a damn thing for him. Be very honest with you. But remember, Donald Trump said he only appoints the very best people.
Is that right?
And look how many chiefs of staff he had. Look at members of his cabinet who have flipped on him. I mean, I think the real case is, look at all the people who supported Donald Trump who no longer support him.
Yeah, that's true.
And that to me is the key. If you don't have the loyalty of your staff or people you've worked with, whether it's former cabinet officers or White House officials, I think your credibility is brought into real place. If I were leading the campaign against Donald Trump in 2024, I would just have all of those people do a commercial. Each one of them. From Rex Tillerson. You remember Rex Tillerson, who was Secretary of State? Now, you can go down the list.
Yes, of all the people that had to get out of there. Yeah.
Yeah. And many of whom faced real legal problems as well.
Let's talk about Tommy Tuberville.
Oh, gosh.
And his hold on military promotions and how this has been allowed to go on and on and on. Well, there's a new memo that is out that says Tuberville's hold on military promotions will take hundreds of hours to process individually.
300 hours is the estimate I read this morning.
I'm reading another one. According to CNN, it'll take the Senate about 700 hours of floor time to individually process and vote on hundreds of military officers whose promotions are being blocked by Tommy Tuberville. That, according to the Congressional Research Service,
it's
in
so
a memo,
irresponsible.
700 hours. Really?
The Republicans need to discipline this member of the Senate. They need to say, you can't keep doing this. But those are the Senate rules. So you know what you do then? You rewrite the Senate rules. Right. One senator should not have the ability to hold up the promotions for over 300 military people who, by the way, you understand that Mark Milley, the chief of staff, is retiring next month.
Yeah.
And his successor has to be confirmed. Well, Tuberville's holding it up. So what does that mean? It means the Senate may have to vote separately just on Mark Milley's successor. I mean, it's a disgrace. The real question will be, Alabama is a military state, tremendous military presence in the state of Alabama.
Right.
What will the voters in Alabama say when Tuberville runs for re-election?
I would hope they would say, you're not doing the people's work.
I'd hope they'd throw him out on his you-know-what.
I hope so, too, because all over abortion, You're holding up the business of the American people because you're trying to make a point.
You know what's crazy, Kim? If you are in the military and you are in a country where you cannot receive particular treatment because of religious views, whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
the military flies you out
Yeah.
free of charge to get treatment where you can.
Yeah.
The same thing applies here.
Yeah.
And federally, what Tommy Tuberville is doing is a disgrace.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, the Republican leadership understands that, but they're afraid to antagonize him because they need his vote in the Senate.
I
And it's
agree.
a shame. Look, I hate to say this, but the Republican Party has failed on so many levels. It's unbelievable.
John Rothman, I can't even believe it. Our half an hour together has gone whipping through time and space, and it's
No.
over. I
Tell
know.
me it isn't so.
It's true. I adore you. Thank you for coming on the Mark Thompson Show and always being here. If you haven't seen or heard Around the Political World with John Rothman, check it out. It's on all podcast platforms. You can find it there. Just do the search. And thank you for being on the show. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Kim. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.